as it's some of the fish up in on the tropical areas. And within this bay, we've got quite a number of fish that are endemic only to this area, mainly amongst what we refer to them as the little sand sharks, the smaller reef sharks. False Bay is unfortunately quite protected. They don't allow any trawling in the bay here, and the type of fishermen that operate in the area are mainly the traditional fishermen from Cork Bay, who are line fishermen, and a couple of sports anglers. But there are still, in the bay, there are a number of areas which are regarded as breeding sites for cob and for steenbras, and those areas are unfortunately still permit dragnet fishing. So quite often fish that come in to spawn and breed happen to fall within the range of these gillnet or land-based net fishermen, and they actually trawl the whole group in and destroy that viable breeding population. But so False Bay is a spectacular area. Good part of it is fortunately protected, and this time of the year we have an incredible gathering of whales, mainly southern right whales, that congregate in these waters.
Impact of on the ground, on the bottom floor of the trawlers?
Well, trawlers don't really operate here, but on the other side of this reserve is an area which we refer to as the canyon area, where the water is particularly deeper than here. And it's the kind of interface where you have the cold water and the warm water mixing, because although we have this cold Benguela current pushing up coming down the coast, pushing up the coast from the subantarctic, we have a countercurrent that comes from the other side, and that countercurrent is usually warm water, and that's where all the predatory fish live. And then you have the bait fish within the colder water. Now that's an area that the trawlers target, because it supports quite a biodiversity of fish, mainly the hake and kingklip. The problem with the trawler is non-specific. They basically create this huge wall of net, and they just trawl everything within range of that. And it takes everything. There's a huge amount of bycatch. It doesn't quite scrape. Bycatch is non-target fish. It could be fish. It could be mammals. It could be dolphins. It could be anything that happens to be in the path of that net is taken. And those nets trawl for 3 hours. And once they pull it out, everything, the contents of that net gets dropped into a hold, and then it gets processed. So in the time of being trawled for 3 hours and then being thrown out of the water into this big cargo hold and then being processed, most of the animals don't survive. So what would happen then is the fishing company would just take out the viable fish, and the rest would just be thrown out the back. There are quite a few other techniques of fishing beyond, other than the trawling, is the long lining. And the long lining is a matter of having a long rope with multiple lines with hooks, which are baited, and it's also quite non-target, because they might be looking to catch what they call the normal lionfish by baiting for kingklip and for hake, but they catch quite a number of sharks in the process as well. And those fish don't survive. Other that is the number of seabirds that are actually attracted to this fishing operation. So you've got albatrosses, and you've got shearwaters, and all the incredible flocks of pelagic birds out there that actually follow these fishing vessels. And quite a few of them dive as the ropes are recovered. The long liners, with each rope with this whole series of hooks, and the quite often albatrosses that actually get impaled on the hooks and brought out. So we lose a lot of albatrosses in the process of that. So talking about bycatch, these animals all suffer as a consequence of this fishing operation.
Some people would say that the effect of dropping so much dead fish that is just not the one that they wanted over the edge could mean a lot of food for other fish. Is this indeed what happens?
It is. It's one of the most. I mean, it's quite a significant thing to be around a boat that's pulling a net or lifting a long line, because it does attract everything. I mean, it's for a fisherman. If you're a tuna fisherman, it's probably one of the best places to catch a fish, because the predatory fish know this. They're conditioned already to know that when a trawler lifts a net, that there's going to be a reward or two. So do the birds. So that's true, but the thing is that there's just so much they can eat, and the rest is just pure wastage. It's just a loss of unnecessary life. Man is polluting quite a few of these coastal areas with the sewage situations, and quite a few of the rivers in Cape Town that have been previously quite polluted have also had quite an effect on the estuaries and the coastline. But I think the bigger problem in the rock lobster industry is that they're using a very, very the method of catching lobsters utilizes what they call a trap, which is a huge basket-like box, which has got two funnels on either side. And the problem is that these fishermen often put these traps out on very, very bad weather days, because they're forced they have a pressure to catch a certain number of quota within a certain time frame. So they do expose themselves to some extreme conditions, and in the process lose these nets. And once this net is lost, it continues for almost infinity until that net actually disintegrates, continually catching everything through that funnel system. So they might have started out and had a trap full of crayfish, but those crayfish rot and attract other crayfish. So there's more destruction by them losing one of those nets than probably by them just fulfilling their quota. And if you go onto the western side of the peninsula, you'll just see beaches littered with those traps. Count up to about 30, 40 at the moment in the reserve, and just try and think back of when they might have lost that, and what a process of killing that net has gone through until it eventually found its way onto the beach. They should prevent operators from using those. They should be.
Man is impacting the planet everywhere, and one of the big problems that is happening is potentially with global warming. They're anticipating a man-made, man-induced heating of the planet, and thus rising the sea levels because of the melting ice. What impact would that have, in your opinion, on? I mean, can you sort of foresee how it might unwind up the process? Up goes the sea level. Let's say, give it 2 meters. How will that change things for anybody, for anything?
Well,
good or
if
bad?
you're talking about the marine environment,
mostly, but and coastal.
Well, I think it will certainly impact on man, because man is really, wherever possible, try to develop their best position along the coast. In terms of, it's become a very valuable, highly sought after residential asset. So I think man has probably ventured a little bit too far in terms of nature's boundaries, and I think that is just a bit of an oversight, because the environment is constantly going through change, and the earth has its cycles, and the cycles have existed forever. In a place like False Bay, for quite a bit of its existence, it was actually dry land. It's not a very deep bay, and at some part of it was a dunescape. So every 30 to 40,000 years, we've had this process of sea level rise and fall. It's a dynamic process. Our kind of history is quite limited in terms of time scale, as opposed to what the Earth's time scale is. The debate of global warming is an ongoing debate. I mean, there are quite a few factors that are influencing it. man's kind of impact of energy consumption and deforestation and pollution and things like that have had an effect. But one calls it the dangers of global warming, but I think there are even greater dangers in global warming. I see global warming as something which is part of the natural cycle. I think the Earth, in fact, at the moment, the Earth is actually going into an ice age. So maybe there is a little bit of a counterbalance happening between global warming and us going into the next ice age. So maybe it's counteracting itself a bit. But there are other factors.
How do you explain the Arctic Sea becoming ice-free then, if we go into an ice age?
That might have other factors influencing it. We know very clearly that we have affected a lot of our atmospheric conditions by polluting the atmosphere with excessive build-ups of waste gases, which have had an impact on the ozone. And then also the ocean currents have also gone through some dynamic changes in that, and the ocean currents have actually warmed as well, whereas in other areas they've cooled. We're all concerned about global warming, affecting the ice, but the ice in the past has gone through some very similar patterns where it has thawed and froze again. I mean, one actually can take slices of icebergs and go into quite a bit of history, noticing that type of detail. But for me personally, I think it's more man's impact on really physical things, tangible things. And I know you have this.
Has there been a full ice age in the last 250 million years, where the whole planet was completely icebound?
It has been.
Has there? Completely icebound, like a snowball?
Not completely locked up, and that's why the Cape is rather different from other areas, and that's why we have such a diverse vegetation type, because some parts of the world are relatively ice-free, even during that great chill. There are two schools. You obviously got the scientists that have their... we live in a society where everything is about finding a mechanism of survival, and even scientists have to find a mechanism of survival. And if they can come up with a good theory to support their situation as a scientist, then they're sustaining themselves. And if that theory is to promote the idea that we're going through a time of stress, that global warming is a major impact, then it does create a bit of a public hype, and it does get people on board to help them support their research, because it becomes then a sustainable opportunity for that scientist. And there are two schools. Somebody might have a different theory, and whoever puts the right theory together, because there are many explanations for these environmental effects. One can actually put it down to much more than just pure global warming. And it also depends on how people are lobbied, and how the political support kind of rallies around certain issues, and the way that they can get people on board to achieve their end. There's a great amount of support for anything where one raises a level of fear amongst people. When their security is compromised, if their well-being is stressed, they will always find mechanisms to try and discount their stress situation on something, which is most often bigger issues like environment. And I think the environmental issues that they put out there, and the doom and gloom that they present, are sometimes a bit of a smokescreen for other things that are going down.
And yet, previous civilizations have become extinct, we've basically gone down.
Well, I think a lot of that is human dynamics. Those extinctions would probably be effect of maybe a localized environmental factor, an extended drought, or a local flood, and I mean, those situations have existed in the past. It's not that the world hasn't had catastrophic environmental conditions. I mean, they have happened. We do have volcanoes erupting, having a huge effect on a much greater area than just the local one. I think it's more how man influences his local environment, and how they can try and keep a status quo of balancing nature and balancing human needs.
renewable energy laws and legislation, in which we have stated clearly that developing renewable energy and new energy will be our priorities.
在本世纪头10年，中国在可再生能源发展上已经走得比较快。
In the first decade of this century, China have achieved a lot in developing renewable energy and new energy.
我在昨天介绍中国能源发展的情况上已经讲了，中国的风电已经位居世界第2。
Yesterday, in my keynote speech, I have stated that the installed capacity of wind power in China ranked #1 in the world.
水电呢位居世界第1。
And the installed capacity of hydropower ranks #1 in the world.
太阳能光伏电池的这个产量已经达到这个世界的50%。
And we have half of the solar batteries around the world.
中国太阳能光伏发电的能力已经达到60万千瓦。
And the installed capacity of solar PV is about 600 megawatt.
今年到年底，我们有可能达到80万千瓦。
By the end of this year, we expect the installed capacity to increase to 800 megawatt.
太阳能热水器的利用面积，我们已经占到全世界总量的50%，也是世界第1。
And for solar water heater, we have the coverage of about half of the world coverage, ranks #1 around the world.
第3点，我们还要这个在解决好安全的前提下，要积极的发展核电。
Thirdly, we will actively develop a nuclear power plant on the prerequisite of safety.
中国目前在建的核电的规模有3097万千瓦。
Currently, the nuclear power units under construction is 30.97 gigawatt.
那么这个建设规模也是世界第1。
And for the scale of construction, it also ranks #1 around the world.
在日本福岛核事故之后，中国对建成的核电站进行了安全的评估，对在建的核电站也进行了安全的评估。
After Fukushima accident, the Chinese government has carried out safety evaluation about all the nuclear power units under construction, and we also carry out an investigation on all the nuclear power units in operation.
我想你们也可能知道，中国在核电发展上在积极的和美国、和法国、和俄罗斯、和世界上核电最先进的国家进行国际合作。
And as we all know, China is actively carrying out international cooperation concerning the construction of nuclear power units with the United States, France, and Russia, with this kind of most advanced nations in nuclear field.
我们一定要用最先进的核电技术解决核电的安全问题。
And we are supposed to solve the problem of safety with the most advanced and most safe technologies.
同时呢，你也可能知道，中国的这个能源结构以煤为主，我们的煤炭、煤电占到这个发电装机的70%左右。
And in China, we have to confess that the energy mix is still coal-based, and coal-fired power plants constitute about 70% of all the power units in China.
所以中国的这个能源结构与世界的能源结构是不一样的。
Therefore, the energy mix in China is opposite with the average energy mix in the world.
世界的能源结构当中，石油、天然气占到70%左右。
In the average energy mix, oil and gas constitute about 70% of all the energy consumption.
由于中国的这种能源资源和能源结构，就决定中国今后仍然要发展火电。
Considering the current or the status quo in the energy mix in China, which is coal-based primarily, it decides that in the next phase, China will still develop its energy on the basis of coal-fired power plants.
但是我们在发展火电方面已经采取了很多积极有效的技术措施、管理措施、政策措施，促进火电厂清洁高效发展。
In the utilization of coal-fired power plants, the Chinese government has carried out a lot of active and very effective technological management and also policy measures in order to develop coal-fired power plants in a cleaner way.
第一点，我们在2005年到2010年期间，已经通过上大压小的政策，关闭7000多万千瓦的小火电机组。
From the year 2005 to 2010, we have carried out supporting the large-scale coal-fired power plants and closing down small coal-fired power plants strategy, which have retired about 76 gigawatts of small coal-fired power plants.
这种行动在世界各国都是前所未有的。
And I think this kind of activities is unprecedented around the world.
第二呢，我们通过这种上大压小，使我们国家的大机组的比重，特别是30万、60万，甚至80万、100万的火电机组，占到整个火电装机的80%左右。
Through this kind of activities and the strategic measures, we have also optimized the structure of coal-fired power plants in China. Currently, large-scale coal-fired power units, which has the installed capacity of 300 megawatt, 600 megawatt, and 800 megawatt, even 1 gigawatt has constituted about 80% of all the coal-fired power plants.
第三点，通过这种措施，我们火电厂的供电煤耗下降了20多克。现在中国全国火电厂供电煤耗达到330克千瓦时，也是接近世界先进水平。
Through this kind of effective measures, we also optimize the cost of coal in coal-fired power units. Currently, the coal consumption for per kilowatt hour of power is about 333 grams, which has been reduced by 37 grams through the 5-year plan. Currently, I think the status quo for coal-fired power plants in the respect of coal consumption is pretty advanced around the world.
第四点，我们已经要求中国的新建的火电厂都要加装脱硫、脱硝、脱氮的这种技术措施。
Fourthly, we have asked all the new rising coal-fired power plants to add desulfurization devices in their construction.
同时对老电厂进行脱硫、脱硝、脱氮的技术改造。
And at the same time, we'll also carry out desulfurization reform and upgrade for old coal-fired power plants.
那么在电价政策上，给予这些清洁环保的措施给予一定的鼓励和支持。
As for the tariff policy, we also support the construction of cleaner and more effective coal-fired power plants.
我们欢迎世界各国的专家、能源组织到中国去参观中国的火电厂。
We welcome experts and organizations from around the world to pay visit to China's coal-fired power units.
我认为中国的火电厂在世界上来看，从管理、技术到清洁、环保，还有这个火电厂这个周围的环境，都已经是非常好的。
We believe that the coal-fired power plants in China is pretty advanced in no matter in the respect of technology and also environmental friendly and also more clean and management.
我们火电厂实行零排放。
For coal-fired power plants, we encourage the operators to carry out a zero-emission strategy.
有很多火电厂就像花园工厂一样。
Some of the coal-fired power plants are like gardens.
而且我们呢，在发展火电的同时呢，还大力发展热电厂。
When we are constructing coal-fired power units, we also encourage them to carry out cogeneration.
发展天然气电厂。
And also gas-fired power plants.
发展煤存气电厂。
and utilization of cobalt methane.
还有在要求一些大型的钢铁化工企业实行压擦余热发电。
And we also encourage the steel companies and chemical companies to utilize their redundant heat.
所以中国在优化火电方面做了很多大量的工作。
To sum up, China have achieved a lot and made painstaking efforts in optimizing the structure of coal-fired power plants.
在“十二五”能源规划当中，我们又要求火电厂要采取更加积极有效的措施，发展高效、先进、清洁的火电机组。
In the 12th five-year plan, we still encourage those operators to develop high-efficient, more advanced, and much cleaner coal-fired power units.
在这里，我还要向你传递一个信息：中国30万、60万以上的火电机组的技术指标、经济指标，在世界上都是比较先进的。
Hereby, I would also like to share this information with you that currently the status quo, or the conditions and levels and criteria for 300 megawatt, 600 megawatt coal-fired power plants are performing pretty well around the world.
我们火电设备的价格性能比，在国际上都是有很强的竞争力。
And they are also cost-effective in the international market.
2010年，我们向世界各国出口火电设备1800万千瓦。
In the year 2010, we have exported the installed capacity of more than 10 gigawatt.
2011年，仍然有很多国家订购了中国的火电设备。
Hopefully, in the year 2011, we will welcome more purchase from the international market.
所以，请你放心，中国今后的火电厂会越来越干净、越来越清洁、越来越美丽。
So I can say confidently that in the next phase, China's coal-fired power plants will be much cleaner and much beautiful.
所以，欢迎你到中国参观中国的火电厂。
So I would also like to invite experts and organizations from around the world to pay a visit to China's coal-fired power plants to see with your own eyes.
这是我回答你的第一个问题。
That's my answer to your first question.
I'm here at the invitation of the department just to sponsor a little bit of a portion of what they are doing. And I have gladly done that because I believe in what the symposium seeks to achieve because it immediately has an impact on what I do. The more fish there is, the more possibility that I will, as a company, will gain out of that.
Okay.
In a shrinking market, what happens is that everybody gets cut. Now, if they cut something from me, that immediately threatens my sustainability as a company. We are governed by an annual allocation, whereby our scientists conduct assessments from which the minister either increases or reduces it. The last 3 years, what we call total allowable catch, which is the determination of the entire stock that can be fished in that particular year, has been reducing. And we have been reduced 3 times already. And it's getting, and it's hurting now. It's beginning to hurt. It would be the demise of my operation. Because when you are a company, you're a legal person, you've got certain responsibilities. It's just like a man who is out of work, he still has a bond, he still has a car to pay, he still has kids to take through to school. So the company, what would happen? Number one, to the people who work for me. Number two, what happens to the repayment of the capital investment? It just can't. So suspension is definitely not an answer. I think and hope that the actions that are being implemented in South Africa will prevent that from happening. We, as I say, number one, our fishery is well governed. Every year, the minister gets a mandate from the scientists. That is one side of it. The other side of it, it is we as a country, we're not bad in terms of looking after the resource. DAF, as we call them, that is the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, run a very sophisticated vessel monitoring system, which helps a great deal. But thirdly, and most importantly, the operators themselves, ourselves, have our own monitoring regime. We subject ourselves to self-monitoring, which to me is the most important facet of ensuring that the resource is not only healthy, but can last us longer than leading us to a situation where we are forced to suspend the operations. Well, I would say only in certain species. I think I'm subject to correction. I think with regard to abalone, which has been subjected to enormous pressure from poaching, I think the department has suspended it. As I say, I speak under correction.
In 1988, that's when we had Bill Molson, the founder of permaculture, who came from Australia. He held a workshop in Botswana on permaculture. And two of our guys, who are now our trustees, went to attend the workshop. And then after the workshop, that's when they turned this farm into a training center. And their main focus was permaculture. Permaculture means permanent agriculture, but it can be defined in many ways. Some say it's an approach to designing system which will give sustainable rewards. Right now, as permaculture is growing up, we are now slowly getting into urban communities. We use natural resources for the production of our crops. Like for instance, for soil improving, we use this type of composting. So we just harvest fresh cow dung, and then we put it in this container, we perforate it, and then put the dung in, and then introduce worms. After a period of 3 months, the worms will be doing the decomposition. They will be decomposing the stuff, and then after 3 months it will be ready. Then we take it and then put it in sieves. We mix with sand and then pot it. Then after those 3 months, the worms will be in abundance, and we could use them for feeding our poultry, and the extra we can take it for fishing or for fishing or for selling, or we could introduce them in the garden, because they will be in abundance. Nature is working for us.
Okay.
Sure. And then this system is called the container garden. It's ideal for those people who are residing in flats who doesn't have where to do the cultivation. You just fill in an old sack with compost and a bit of soil. Then you perforate it and then you plant your vegetables. You're home and dry. And if you think of going for a holiday resort somewhere, you just take it and then put it at the back of your truck. Then you'll be having fresh vegetables with you. These are herbs. Herbs are used in various ways. Some are used for culinary, some has got medicinal properties, some are used as repellents if planted with vegetables. For instance, we have this one. It's called nasturtium. Some use it as just a flower, but it has got more properties than just being a flower. We use it to deworm our livestock. It's very, very, very useful. And for human beings, if you have got upset stomach, take the flowers and then chew them, swallow the juice. If you have got eye ailments, you could just take the flowers and then you put them in boiling water, let it cool, and then bath your eyes. It helps a lot. Then we have celery. This one we use it as a repellent again if planted with the brassicas. And apart from that, on medicinal properties, it suppresses BP. One is suffering from BP. If he takes this one regular on his or her diet, it reduces BP.
What is BP?
Blood pressure.
Oh, okay.
Blood pressure.
Celery.
Celery. And then this one is called thyme. Thyme, variegated thyme. This one is used for cooking, in fact. Apart from cooking, it has got many medicinal uses again. You could use it for whooping cough, you could use it for bronchitis, you could use it for headaches, or for boosting up one's immune system. If one, especially those, it could be AIDS victims, if they take this one, it helps them to boost their immune system. The lifespan will be a little bit prolonged if they take this one regular on their diet. It's very, very useful. Mint is in different varieties. We've got spearmint, we've got black mint, we've got peppermint. Right. It is used for sore throat. If somebody is suffering from sore throat, colds, flu, you could use this one. Just take it as herbal tea. Or if somebody is suffering from dizziness, you could just take a herbal tea of mint. It helps a lot. And then apart from that, if planted under fruit trees, it helps as a repellent of fruit flies. Plus, it's a very good soil binder. Wherever there is a little erosion taking place, if you plant it, it binds up the soil very well. That it reduces soil erosion. Called lemongrass. Lemon. Maybe the word lemongrass comes from that it has got a lemon flavor, and it smoothens the skin. Especially with the ladies, they like this one. Yeah. Acacia trees, they are termed as legumes. We use them in agroforestry, whereby we mix crops and trees. They are nitrogen fixers, and they are fodder. They can be used as windbreak. It doesn't shed the field. If planted with the crops tend to do very well. They can even grow very nice under these trees. They are very, very friendly.
Except for the thorns.
Sure. The group is the poor rural farmers who doesn't have enough cash maybe to buy these so-called barbed wires. One could resort to this type of trees called Doviaris scapula. It makes a very good live fence if planted close. It develops thorns, and by so doing it inhibits goats, donkeys to enter in a field. Very, very useful. And apart from being a shield, it produces fruits which could be taken, and they're very, very nice, very rich in vitamin C. For it. We have here is we have indigenous trees, be it indigenous fruit trees and then trees. And then we've got exotic trees, fruit trees and not fruit trees. And we have passion fruits and we have herbs. But generally, they are for generating income and improving sites within Fambizanai. Wherever we feel like there's bare land, we could just take them and then plant them to improve the site.
How does it improve the site?
Whenever a site is very bare, if you've got a massive downpour of rainfall, erosion takes place. But if you plant trees, the roots helps to bar the runoff and then let the water penetrate into the soil. And you could even introduce grass. You plant trees and then you plant grass. By so doing, erosion is minimized. That's how it improves the site. We plant our crops diversified. The reason being that we are trying to encourage a symbiosis friendship, whereby if you have got a nitrogen fixer, that nitrogen fixer will be fixing nitrogen, thereby benefiting the neighbor. It could be, in this case, it could be spinach. The nitrogen that is left by this bean is taken by the spinach, right? And at the same time, if I've got an outbreak of a certain disease, if that disease attacks spinach, at least you are left with beans. But if you've got just a field of spinach, if that disease comes, it wipes away everything, and you are left with nothing. Those are the advantages of diversifying. And at the same time, we encourage farmers to cover the soil. The reason being that if the soil is covered, there is little runoff. And at the same time, there is much percolation. The temperature of the soil remains constant when the soil is covered. There is little evaporation. And at the same time, it decomposes as time goes by. It decomposes, and by so doing, it will be adding fertility into the soil.
So that's just grass?
You could use grass, you could use dead leaves, you could use live mulch, whatever you have. Because we are saying it depends with the place you are. If you are in region 1, if you are in region 4, whatever you have there, make use of it. If you don't have even grass or leaves or whatever, you could use even stone mulching. But that one is ideal under fruit trees. You could use stone mulching. We also encourage farmers to dot a few fruit trees in their fields or in their gardens.
Right.
If you compare the production that you get from one tree and the production that you get on a piece of land planted vegetables, you could see that from a tree you get huge sums of money. So we encourage farmers to dot a few fruit trees into their system for boosting income.
What kind of tree is this one?
It's macadamia nut.
Which one?
That one. Macadamia nut.
That looks like
Very, very expensive. A kg you could buy it at least something like $300 and something dollars, Very, very expensive. Okay, this one is called Lucina. It's a nitrogen fixer, and at the same time it's fodder. At the same time it's working as hedge here. In permaculture we say at least one element should serve main functions, right? So apart from just being hedge here, it is barring diseases, the other diseases that travel with wind like blight. So whenever you have a hedge in your garden, that disease could be trapped here and then doesn't get to your vegetables or crops or whatever. That this time of the year there is outbreak of pests. Vegetables doesn't do very well. We are leaving this so that we could feed our livestock because we believe in recycling. We take waste from the garden and then we feed our livestock, and then in return we get manure. We put it on a compost, we re-put it, we reapply it into the garden. So it's sort of a cycle. You could see some of the farmers taking off these old vegetables, throwing them away. That's not a good idea. Recycle it so that it gives benefits again back to that land where you harvested it. And then after that you put a heavy feeder, it could be maize, so that it makes use of the nitrogen that is left by the prior plant.
Yeah.
It's a peach. It's called the elderberry. The flowers are used if somebody is suffering from a heavy flu. You could use those flowers. And the leaves are used for making compost, very rich in nitrogen. And you could use it as hedge again. So hedges are very, very important for stopping wind erosion.
Yeah.
And trees should be shaped in a way that it will become easy for one to harvest. It will become easy for one to spray. So we don't encourage farmers to leave trees growing high up. It will be very difficult for them to harvest. And at the same time, they end up having their kids having fractures because they climb up there, which is very, very much dangerous. So in the necessary course that we give, we train them that they should train their tree. A tree can behave in the way you want if you train it, but if you leave it, it will give you problems. So this is the result of training.
So
The branches are growing sidewise. It's very easy to harvest. You can even harvest when you are standing. You can even spray.
from the supermarket or any supermarket. That we've got to change that mindset, and it does take time, and but we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our children, and we owe it to the planet.
Can you just tell us a little bit about fasting, its long-term thing, starvation?
Okay. I'm not a great fan of fasting, although the occasional fasting one day at a time is not a bad thing. But you've got to be very careful, because fasting is, and you've got to be really healthy to be able to fast. And a lot of people even think they're healthy when they aren't, because what happens when you fast is that you actually start to detoxify. You're more than if you aren't fasting. So because the fasting kind of, the longer you are without food, you're using up more of the body's energies to do that detoxification process. But detoxification doesn't just take energy; it also takes all the nutrients. So you've got to make sure that you've supplied your body with those. I'm a sort of a bit of a believer in what's called the intermittent fasting. Basically, you should always make sure that there's 12 hours before your dinner and your breakfast, and up to 16 hours. I think with people who are diabetic or have blood sugar levels, you've got to be very careful. But for an average, relatively healthy person, it actually has been shown to do all sorts of good things to the body. So I think, and you've got to drink lots of water when you make sure. And I'm also a great fan of herbal teas, and when I say herbal teas, I do not mean the tea bags, although obviously those are what's convenient for people. But go out there's so many herbs and spices out there that actually are helpful for detoxing and fasting. So like ginger, fenugreek, milk thistle, star anise. It's just like all turmeric, lemon, mint, lemongrass, all those things. And I grow quite a lot of those in my garden, but I also go through my spice shelf, put in some whatever herbs and spices. And that's another way of getting like a whole lot of nutrients that are easily absorbable, so you're kind of feeding yourself without actually having to eat a whole meal that's got 20 different vegetables in it. Because ideally that's what we want, 20 different vegetables, not 5 different vegetables. It's rubbish.
And starvation, what kind of impact does that have, and why?
Yeah, well, it starts, but I think one of the reasons why starvation will actually the body actually starts to use up muscle to actually do the biochemical process that it requires to stay alive. So it needs nutrients to do all the things that it has. So basically, while you're starving, your body the metabolic rate starts to slow down, but it doesn't stop. So you need it still needs all the nutrients that are required to sort of break down and make cells and make just to keep you alive, to give you energy, etc. So what starts happening is the body starts to leach the proteins out of your muscles, and it's not necessarily just your limb, the muscles of your limbs, or the love muscles that you can see. There'll also be the heart muscle, the lung muscles, the kidneys muscles, the gastrointestinal tract muscles. All those will actually start to break down, and then you get that muscle wasting, which is indicative of basically of starvation. So you will actually, and then if your muscles are wasting, then your heart can't actually pump, your digestive tract can't move food down it, and you start to just really slow down, and the body will then starve to death, and all the tissues and organs will actually stop functioning ultimately.
A slight change in subject. There are certain foods that have been associated with having something really good about them.
It's anti-inflammatory. It's got that beautiful bright yellow color. So if you can put that into, you can put it into curries, you can put it into your green smoothie drink, you can put it into your tea. It can go into a lot of different things. So it's just foods that are very, very, very high in nutrients. And the more you put those in, kind of the healthier you're going to be. You're giving your body you're kind of giving your body choices. Just like you would like to have choices when you start going to me, you want to give your body the choices to be able to use this or that or whatever it wants to make what it wants to keep you healthy. The more limited your diet is, then the less options it has, the less choices it has. So all those superfoods, they all have other benefits. The turmeric is anti-inflammatory. It brings down your blood sugar levels. It helps with detoxification. It supplies certain nutrients that are required for certain biochemical processes that are really healthy. So cinnamon lowers blood sugar levels. It's also good for the liver and things. So those, so the more of those kind of foods the sort of intensely flavored, brightly colored foods that you can put into your diet, the better it is.
Obesity, the
Yeah.
single biggest problem in America especially, but also becomingly so in our population in South Africa here. Obesity, when you look at a person, what do you know about them as a result?
I know
of
they're
seeing-
malnourished.
Yeah, that's funny, I know.
I know they're malnourished because basically fat cells don't require as much nutrients to be able to be made as a healthy, metabolically active cell. So they've obviously been eating foods that are nutrient deficient. And the other aspect is also stress. There's no doubt about that. Basically, when you are stressed, your cortisol, there's a stress hormone called cortisol, which rises, and along with that, so when you're stressed, when a healthy stress response, for example, if you were to run from a tiger or a lion or something, you have that cortisol level goes up, and then it tells the liver to break down glycogen, which is the stored sugar, and then your blood sugar level goes up, and then that sugar should go into your cells and muscle cells, and then you should just keep on running. But unfortunately, most of us, when we have chronic stress situations, we're not running from the tiger. We're actually sitting there waiting for that stress to just keep on coming to us. So our cortisol level goes up, our blood sugar level goes up, our insulin level goes up. So insulin is used to take sugar out of the blood and into the cell. So, but because the blood sugar levels constantly, so your cortisol levels are sort of constantly high, your blood sugar levels are constantly high because it's chronic stress, and your insulin levels are chronically high. What happens is that the insulin actually takes that sugar and turns it into fat, and that's what that sort of specifically that sort of fat that's around the belly comes from that. And so it's quite often people say, oh, but I eat so healthily, but I still get fat, and that's quite often because of that stress. It's a stress response. So yes, it's possibly that it's a combination of things, and then there's also all the chemicals and things that we doesn't really know what to do with it. So it's like we are kind of just adding another toxic load to our system. I actually, water is it's not easy. You want to try and get it as available to people, which is one of the reasons why I really liked again herbal teas, because you boil the water. So instead of filtering water, filtering water is good, but it also takes out the good with the good with the bad. So you're left with a sort of dead water. If you drink a herbal tea, you're going to boil off the chlorine, and then you're going to add in all the phytonutrients and nutrients from herbal teas, and it's I think actually preferable to drink herbal teas to water. So yeah, and then there's all sorts of other toxins that can get into the water system, like hormones from all the millions of people who are on HRT and the pills. So there's like the estrogen levels are sky high in some water tables, and other water that's near mining mines and things. There's going to be toxins getting into the water and things. So yeah, it's difficult. We have to do the best we can with what we have, but if we don't try our best, then we're not going to get anywhere.
Potentially the last question.
Yes.
As you mentioned, we are 90% bacteria.
Yeah.
And microorganisms.
Yes.
There's this big rage in this era, marketing mostly, which says that you've got to have antibacterial, antiseptics, and it is really worrying to me the amount that we actually are putting ourselves in contact with things which are actually killing the bacteria that we need on our hands as well. And
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Can you mention in what way one can protect oneself from it? Would you use an antiseptic hand wash?
Never.
Yes.
I would never use one.
Seriously?
I would never use an antiseptic hand wash. Hot soapy water is actually absolutely fine. There's people, we bath too much, we shower too much. Just top and tail, and you're good to go. Keep the healthy bacteria on your skin for, we didn't used to bath and shower every day, twice a day, 3 times a day, and then cover ourselves with antiseptic creams and petrochemical creams. It's just not what we should be doing. We should be using natural things. I do use some essential oils for if I've got, for various things, like maybe if I was for scent, for example, I'll use some rose geraniums essential oil or something like that. So, and I use tea tree oil sometimes, for you can use oregano oil. They've all got antibacterial properties, but they're not like those antibiotics and antiseptics that are just sort of randomly kill every single bacteria, good or bad. So we absolutely have to have those bacteria, and people actually seem to think that every time they get sick they just need to take an antibiotic, and it's just destroying our gut microbiota. So we're just getting sicker and sicker from it, because it's an essential part of our lives, and we
Does that explain that somebody said to me the other day, we need to reintroduce the amount of fermented foods in our diet?
Absolutely. I'm a great fan of fermented foods. But most people are familiar with probably yogurt and sauerkraut. Those are probably the things that most people are familiar with. They are basically foods. It's a process used to keep food, to keep them make food last longer, and was used more years ago when we didn't have refrigeration, etc. They're full of natural, healthy bacteria. And basically what you do is you just either, for the sauerkraut and kimchi, which is quite sort of fashionable, which is the Korean form of sauerkraut, and it's kind of spicy, and I find much more delicious than sauerkraut. You just basically mix salt, and then I put lots of sort of garlic and ginger and cumin and coriander and things with mine as well. So it's really kind of tasty, and then I leave it to ferment for up to 3 months. And then I'll put it in the refrigerator. But so yogurt, unfortunately, the yogurt that we call yogurt today is hardly yogurt. You can hardly call it fermented foods. If you're making your own yogurt out of organic, non-pasteurized, non-antibiotic infused, non-hormone infused, non-pesticide, herbicide infused milk, and then you're making your own yogurt, and the longer you leave it out to ferment, for example, time is money for the manufacturers, so they're probably fermenting that yogurt for a few hours, and then they add thickeners and this and that to kind of make it feel like it's yogurt, and then 90% of it, 90% they put sugar in it. So you just that's just a total waste of time. As far as I'm concerned, you should be making your own yogurt or buying from a source that you know where it's coming from. And I usually promote something like a 24 to 35 to 36 hour yogurt, maybe even 2 days, because the longer you leave it out of the fridge to ferment, the more bacterial colonies you're going to be encouraging, and the more going to grow. So you're going to be replacing much more of those. Then there's things like kefir, which is a little looks a bit like a cauliflower little floret that you put into milk, which apparently has more bacteria than yogurt, and then more bacterial colonies. And then I use cheese. Yeah, it is, but I don't know if today's processing methods, you'd have to just make sure that you're using processing methods that are going to be doing the right thing. I read something recently about Emmenthal cheese and how it used to have those big holes in it, and that was something to do with, I think that's something to do with the amount of bacteria that's growing, and now those holes are getting smaller and smaller because of the processing method. But also I use a lot of other ones. I mean, I do something called beetroot kvass, which is a fermented beetroot juice, which I encourage people to drink before a meal. Beetroot is very good for the production of bile, so it helps to break down fat in your diet. And fat, when I talk about fat, I mean the good fats and the fatty vitamins like vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin A, vitamin K, and the essential omega oils. So without the ability to break that down, and that happens, I find that quite often happens, and people, especially if they've had their gallbladder removed, have great difficulty absorbing fats. And people think that that's okay, but it's not okay at all, because obviously you need those things.
In this instance, I'm going to talk about water and memory. I'm going to talk about really fundamental memory that water has. And my story is going to begin, and you need to draw a little mental picture of this, of a stream somewhere up in the mountains. Could be any mountains, anywhere. And a group of people are told that this particular stream, where this valley is, and that those mountains, is absolutely one of the most scenic areas in the whole world. And so they get together and decide to travel and visit the stream and do this wonderful hike in nature. So they travel right across continents with all their gear. They move by rail, train, bus, whatever, and they get to this wonderful scenic scene, and they start their walk. And right beside them is this little stream coming down off the mountain. This little stream, at that point, is basically pristine. It has very, very, very little sign of any nutrient, of any pollution. And the hikers walk along, and the scenes are magic. And of course it's a hot day, so they put on suntan lotion and creams on their lips. And as would be the case, it gets hotter and hotter, so they decide to have a swim in one of the pools that this little stream has. So off they go and have a swim, and now they wash off the suntan lotion and all the creams that they've been having smeared over their bodies. And on top of that, they actually also release some body fluids into that stream. After all, it's in the middle of nowhere, so who's it going to affect? I mean, it's just a few of us here, It's going to be washed away. It'll be just dissipated in the mass of water. However, some of the party have been taking some antibiotics. Some of the ladies are on birth control tablets. And some of them actually have a urinary disease. And so at that point, they introduce what would be the first beginnings of pollution and toxic elements. And this is where the memory begins. That stream takes that little plug of the first pollutant and the first nutrients and takes it on its way down the mountain. And so the hikers carry on hiking, they finish their hike, and they end up at a village once a month because the mercury levels have become so high. Now that is indicative of the fact that the water is actually not able to dissipate, or the sheer population numbers are so great that we are not dissipating or able to dissipate the mercury in a small enough quantity for it to be safe, because it gets into the fish and there it remains in the flesh. So if we talk about memory what I want to put across here is that if we consider how we behave and how we treat water, we need to understand that what we do to that water, we don't damage the water. H2O is H2O. We can pour it down the side of a mountain for thousands of feet and bash it off the rocks and it still comes up as water at the bottom. We can boil it and steam it away. It'll just reconstitute again. So we don't actually